Hello, my name is Julian Jonathan, and I'm here today with Douglas Gabriel, Dr. Douglas Gabriel, who says he is actually the one that created the initial archetype and beginnings of Star Wars. So, Dr. Gabriel, would you like to explain what was your hand? How did you get involved and moved into this program and help Star Wars move along?
Well, thank you for being a person who's asking this question. That's one of the reasons that I'm so happy to share this. And as you know from the article that you read, that I wrote about this when I was requested to do so, it was somewhat just by accident. I was a Waldorf student in a Waldorf Institute in Michigan. And I was coming out of the bookstore one day, and my teacher, Dr. Werner Glass, turned to me and said, would you come with me? I followed him. We went into a room with a number of people, and one of them was Marcia Griffin, the wife of George Lucas.
That's right, yes.
And Dr. Werner Glass had been, he was very famous in the anthroposophical world. Anthroposophy means the teachings of Rudolf Steiner that created Waldorf schools for your you need that kind of a foundational perspective in terms of all of this. But Waldorf schools also, well, there's one in North Hollywood where Dr. Glass had ran that school, and he was very familiar with a lot of the people in Hollywood, the stars, the actors, because they sent their children there. So he had somehow met Marcia, and she had taken courses from him, I believe, in anthroposophy. So if someone wants to say what's the real source or the what do you call it, the philosophical or religious, spiritual underpinnings of Star Wars, it actually came from his wife, Marcia Griffin, from my perspective. As I walked into the room, I sat down, and Werner said to these, actually there were 4 students there that I had been in school with, and Marcia, and the 2 directors of the Institute. And he sat down, and Werner said, this is my protege, Douglas Gabriel. He's going to give you whatever you need, which I had no idea what he was even talking about. And then he introduced Marcia and said, she has a husband who's working on the screenplay. You probably know him. He's very famous from the movie American Graffiti. I looked at him with a blank stare. I had not seen the movie.
You hadn't heard of American Graffiti at that point?
No, I didn't watch movies. Waldorf education, we're not into movies and we're not into TV. We're into using the mind as a tool of imagination and using archetypes from all the world religions and fairy tales and legends as the study in literature for our students in the school, the Waldorf schools. So we are not into movies whatsoever. So I hadn't heard of that. It impressed me not in the least that her husband was George Lucas. And she said he'd also made a science fiction movie, which was a flop, and then that he had this screenplay that he'd been working on literally for most of his life. It was an idea he got as a child, and he always dreamt about making this sci-fi movie. So she shared that with us, and our job was to help her in the second, third, fourth rewrite of it. I don't really remember. I don't study Star Wars or anything. But it was one of the rewrites of the early screenplay. She said to us that it had been rejected 2 or 3 times, but that he had a contract for it, so if he could come up with a good screenplay, the movie would go forward because of his fame and his power in Hollywood. So I stopped what I was doing and sat down with the group, and then Werner, to my surprise, got up and left. And then the other director got up and left, and we were all sitting there looking at each other saying, what are we going to do? I didn't know who Marcia Griffin was at the time. I had no idea she was a very famous movie editor.
Really?
She was just a person.
Yeah.
George Lucas's wife studied a little bit of anthroposophy, the work of Rudolf Steiner. So my job was like it'd be with any Waldorf teacher. We had to turn this story into something that was an archetype that would be able to be a truth that is encapsulated in a schemata, an engram, a meme, whatever you want to call it. An archetype that works from beginning to end. And then I knew that once we had done that, then all these very strange characters that he had created, because really that's all the screenplay was that was shown to me, was a list of characters. And in the characters there were certain descriptions of kind of the plot and the way it was to happen, but it was completely disjointed, didn't hang together. And after hearing it and hearing the very sad dialogue that was part of it at that time, there was no dynamic between the characters. So our job was to work that over for 3 days. It was kind of a think tank, which I say in the article I was very shocked that I hadn't been invited to the think tank. And now, by chance, I seem to be the person who had to somewhat steamroll it and make sure that it happened because Werner trusted me to get things done.
So there you are, sitting with 4 or 5 people in a group, and with the wife of one of the big guys in Hollywood. And so you're laid down with this screenplay, a failed screenplay, third, fourth rewrite, and you and this group are think tanking it, just sitting in a room, and it says in the article, for 3 whole days, working through and getting it through. So you mention about your these fairy tales and archetypes inside it. You're telling how it plays and how it flows through. But my question is where do you get these archetypes, and how are they in play and a big part of the Star Wars franchise?
Well, essentially, archetypes come from either, Carl Jung's version of the collective unconscious or the subconscious, or one can see very clearly in the Grimm's fairy tales, Russian fairy tales, that they come from dreams. They were the collective dreams of cultures. Those collective dreams came from the spiritual world, and therefore they have to come in symbol and parable. You can't communicate spiritual thoughts in physical reality. That's the reason in a fairy tale anything can happen. So it's that type of archetype. And we knew that, literally, once she had read this to us, I turned to her and said, well, what you really want is an adult fairy tale, a sci-fi fairy tale.
An adult fairy tale.
Yes, on the level of C.S. Lewis's science fiction trilogy. And she said, yes, that's exactly what we want. I said, well, then first, here, let me show you how a fairy tale works. So I stood up to the board, took colored chalk, and started to show every fairy tale is, and every true myth, legend, fable, or anything else, parable, has a beginning and an end, and you go through catharsis. So you start off with literally the setting, and then you go through catharsis. You have revelations, you come to some revelations throughout it, and then you reach the end and you get the goal, or enlightenment. And then it's over. Well, if you have the right characters, everything all plays out, and all the dialogue comes naturally once you know the true nature of the archetype you're describing. So I pointed out that first we have to start, as all fairy tales do, in a place away from time and space. So I think, how did Star Wars start?
In a galaxy far away, in a time long ago.
Yes, okay, so that's what every fairy tale starts off with. And in the end, what happens? The hero comes to resolve. And we can see in the first 3 of the Star Wars trilogy, which is really one story, that was one fairy tale that was just expanded to 3 movies. What is it that's happening? You have Luke, he called him Luke Starkiller. I was the first person to kill that idea. And said, no, you don't want Star Killer. You want a star, you want someone who is a sky dancer or a skywalker, like the Tibetan tradition of the wind horse or the skywalker, or the Chinese tradition of the Sun Monkey King, who was a skywalker who could catapult across the sky infinitely faster than the gods.
So you're pulling forth these ideas from all different sources, from all around the world.
Well, once we sat down and we started working through these characters, you could see that Lucas had taken everything he kind of knew spiritually and stuffed it in there, and he had other people throughout the different rewrites stick things in there, and that's why you find so many interesting, wonderful spiritual insinuations in this movie, but it didn't hang together. So if a fairy tale starts off in a place away from space and time, then there's a hero. Well, the hero always has 3 challenges. Well, the 3 challenges are really the 3 aspects of the soul, like Dorothy and the 3 characters in The Wizard of Oz. Those are parts of herself. And so Luke had 3 parts to himself. Chewbacca, the kind of lower animal instinctual astral body. Han Solo, who was the thinker but also a liar. And then you have Obi-Wan Kenobi, who was his teacher, the spiritual part of his soul. So there's 3 parts to the soul, and those are really challenges. So how does Luke meet those challenges in the soul of thinking, feeling, and willing? Well, it had to be archetypal. So therefore the plot itself had to have the hero's challenge between the left and right-hand path of evil. And then in the personal life of the hero, it had to show what Lucas had as the only true driving leitmotif of the entire story, was that he wanted to write a movie through the eyes of robots or machines, and how machines would see humans. That is really the intent of his movie, and he did a great job of doing that. I hated that idea. I thought that really was bad. But I saw...
Evidently didn't come to fruition either.
No, a lot of ideas I gave didn't go anywhere. They didn't get put in until even later rewrites. But the point is this idea that the machine is the question of our age. It is the question of our age. And robots and what we'll do with robots has everything to do with moral development. If we follow the path of Darth Vader and machines, you see the right-hand path of evil that leads to fear, death, destruction, obsession, manipulation of people, all the horrible things.
Becoming a robot yourself.
He became a robot. And my most important point that I made is that Luke stands in his challenge first first off, he has Obi-Wan Kenobi, who dies and becomes what they call a Darth ghost or a spirit ghost or something, a Jedi ghost or something, Force ghost, that's what they call him. And so as a dead person, he speaks to Luke. Well, that's what the spiritual world is to speak to people across the threshold of death. Okay? So he has that to begin with, but he has the challenge between his father, which is the truth of our age. Our father in the modern age are machines and robots and electricity and all the things machines do for us. And we must understand our relationship to Darth Vader. And I insisted that he be half machine, half human, and that he had to go through a path of initiation that he would be to this machine-type nature, non-human machine-type nature, through the other left-hand path of evil, which is Palatine, Chancellor Palatine, first senator, then chancellor, and then the evil emperor, who turns Darth Vader to the evil, because the oldest evil in the world is the left-hand path. And that's the path that pulls you out of your body, but every time it does, it pays. You have to pay for it. So when the evil emperor uses, what do they call it, the lightning from his fingers, what does he do? He grows older all the time. He pays for every bit of it. So what does he have to do? He has to convince others to enter into the machines, become the machines, and become his, what is called the willpower. So over here you have thinking divorced of reality, the emperor, and on the other side you have will force divorced of consciousness. So the two are actually working together, but they are working in opposite directions. Luke stands in the middle. So what we see is Luke has the challenge. Will he go to being a Sith Lord who can actually have lightning coming out of his fingers? What is incredible power to hold against your enemies? Or will he go towards Darth Vader, the path of the machine, who is also his father? Well, the resolve of every fairy tale is what? That he meets the princess, the guy meets the princess, or whatever sex you want to go, girl meets the king, whatever. The point is that you meet the other, and you get married, and then you get your kingdom. So what really happens in Star Wars as a fairy tale? Luke meets his other. Strangely enough, his other is his sister.
Yes.
So Luke is the soul, but his sister Leia is the spirit. She is really the part of him that he has to say, oh, at first I thought you were sexually attractive. Now I have to find you spiritually attractive. And we must work together to defeat evil and create a new kingdom. And in fact, they do.
That's quite a shift.
So, yes. So there's the soul evolving with the spirit, looking for the fairy princess, looking for the beautiful lily, as Goethe says, or looking for that other side of yourself, that spirit side. So that's Luke's path. But in it, he has the help of 3CPO, who is, again, a Luciferic left-hand path that doesn't have much to do with reality in the physical world, but uses R2-D2 as his tool to get things done in the mechanical world through a mechanical language. Now, 3CPO understood all languages and, in fact, was a wonderful translator and interpreter, and between the two of them, what can they get done? Absolutely nothing.
That's very true. In the movies, they're some of the most
they do
unfortunately useless characters.
They're witnesses, but they have no morality. They have no ego. And this is the genius of Star Wars, whether it came from Lucas or I believe many of the best ideas came from Marcia Griffin. It's well known, and in the article I put a URL link to a biography written about her recently that I read, which was a big key factor to me speaking about this today. She kept trying to influence him, but he was very stubborn with his idea because this was his baby from a long time before, and he didn't really want to give up much control of it, and that's why there have been so many writers involved in every aspect of the books and other stories and movies, and it's good that Lucas is a genius in all the ways that he is, and that he uses all these different people and congeals the wisdom that they have into a beautiful myth. Now, it's not a myth like J.R.R. Tolkien's attempt to create an English mythology that's a backdrop to history that was never understood. This is a myth of the future, and that's why it's a fairy tale. Fairy tales are they're not in time and space. They happen in a place outside of time and space. So that's why this happens out in space, okay? So
Now, a quick thing.
Yes.
You keep mentioning how it's other people who have put this together, but it's really you and your group that came up with the foundations, the base ideas, and the archetypes. I mean, it says you sat down for 3 entire days on a blackboard and wrote essentially all the story that was going to be out before his wife. That's quite impressive.
Well, I would say that I was just a contributor, but what I like to say is that I helped create a framework for it. In my mind, that's what I say, because I see the picture I drew on the board, and I see how when she then threw out a character, I'd say, it doesn't fit. Scratch the character. No, change that character. That evil character, that's his dad now.
Wow.
And now Luke has a twin. Oh, so then the twin here goes to here, and this from this character goes to this character, and yes, we have to make this hang together. It has to be tangible. The nondescript characters that he had created made it look like a wild, wild west show gone to space. Okay, it didn't hang together. For instance, when I saw that some of the characters had guns. It's like, no. A Jedi warrior doesn't have a gun. He has an aura. That aura takes anything shot at him and turns it equally back to the person it came from.
The lightsaber.
It's what a lightsaber was supposed to be. It's not supposed to be connected from the body. I described it as your electric spine, and that electric force is the force that you have to develop, which then was turned into the metachlorine references, which in fact have to do with the Force. The Force is directly connected, according to Lucas, to metachlorians in your blood. This is the concept found in Rudolf Steiner's anthroposophy called the etherization of the blood, which I said should be the main focus of how people attain becoming a Jedi warrior, is to actually understand how to retain your breath through certain exercises and transmute elements so that then they become light. That's what the lightsaber is supposed to be.
Oh, so it's not even supposed to be a tool. It's supposed to be a part of their being.
Correct. It is a shield that's always in place, 360, completely around you, so that you cannot be harmed.
Sounds a little bit overpowered. So in this, you seem to have a whole lot of brilliant ideas. Did you work with anyone else and any other types of these movies, or any other ideas that you had and shared that brought about things in the world?
Well, yes, but first let me say about my brilliant ideas. They're not my ideas. They're the ideas of Dr. Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy and Waldorf education and all the many things that he created. He is the greatest genius of our time. So you can really say that the spiritual concepts that Marcia Griffin brought into this script came directly from anthroposophy. So if you wanted to go any further with what a real Jedi warrior is, you would study anthroposophy. You'd study the work of Rudolf Steiner. And so my wife has written a book on, well, it really congeals anthroposophy, and it's a wonderful entrance into anthroposophy, and it's called The Gospel of Sophia. That's the kind of things we're trying to help people with. I continue to help my wife in writing these books and articles that I write that go out onto the internet that try to help people understand that, this Jedi Force is a reality and that it can be developed. It is not just something on the silver screen. It is a reality.
You're telling me people have the ability to develop the Force in their lifetime?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And what do they get? They get what Yoda got. Long life, wisdom, and what you saw in the first 3 movies was not a Yoda who was out swinging his lightsaber. He had the Force. He moved things around by the Force. He could change people's minds. He could affect people's minds. And so when the second set of the trilogy came out, it's showing him fighting and stuff. That was kind of sad to me because Yoda's 900 years old, okay? And he lived, he had to go off and live by himself. And he had to hide himself. And the great masters are often hidden. But Rudolf Steiner wasn't hidden. So if you really want to get to the core, there's going to be a book coming out called The Eternal Curriculum my wife and I are working on. And that actually gives you the content of what you would say a Jedi warrior would actually study. So we're continuing to do that work, and I've also been training Waldorf teachers for decades. And I'm retired, but I do other things. But many years ago, I was watching the TV, in the days people watch TV, and I saw Steven Spielberg. And I had seen his movie Poltergeist, and I thought it was amazing because there were anthroposophic concepts in it. And the little woman Well, that was H.P. Blavatsky, who was the founder of Theosophy. Clear as a bell. It was so obvious. So when my friends and I, spiritual friends, saw this, we got so excited and said, Spielberg must be an anthroposophist. Oh my gosh, we have to meet him. Well, we got very, very excited. And so on that day I said, it is a spiritual goal of mine that's in my bucket list that I want to affect Steven Spielberg, because he's the greatest of all directors, on the silver screen, putting anthroposophy up there. Well, to the first part of your question, I had no idea it was going to do anything. I assumed it'd be another flop, like his movie THX 1138 or 39, whichever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in terms of the second part of your question, have I had any other influence on things? I guess I don't really know. You may, do things that you have no idea how they're going to turn out later, but I can say that not long after that, I spoke with Kathleen Kennedy and continued to speak with her for over a year about the movies Indiana Jones.
Whoa.
But that will have to be a video for another day.
Well, you kind of need to make sure to get us when you do, because that sounds like one heck of a story.
It is. It's actually a much more impressive story than this one, that's for sure.
All right, so what I want to ask you is that some of this stuff, you're a big anthroposophist guy. You're very spiritual and very wise. You're a teacher, after all. What I want to ask is, in layman's terms, what exactly did you physically affect? What characters, what ideas, and what was it that you and your group put into Star Wars that came into reality? You're talking about lightsabers, and it's clear how they changed that a little bit, but what is it, just in a handful of things, that you really influenced?
Well, the character of Luke, and that Luke needed to be a hero and not a fighter, that he needed to resist fighting, and that he needed to resist the machines, and he needed to resist power that would be offered to him. That's what everyone has. So the character of Luke, the changing of the character of Leia, and particularly this having Luke walk the path of the Jedi, the middle path, and not go the left path of the evil Emperor, not go the right-hand path of evil of Darth Vader. So everyone in today's world actually has two devils talking to them, one in the left ear, one in the right ear. And we have to find the middle path, and that's not easy to do. So that's what it's about. When do you know you're on the middle path? When literally the Force comes up. Now, one could debate all day, is there such a thing as midichlorians? Well, as far as we know, no. But if you ask George Lucas, he says that he was talking about prana, or life energy.
Oh.
I would say that you could take it a step further, and there's a substance called ormus that is found in every living thing. But when it's super concentrated in the human, it causes your brain waves to cohere, and actually the highest brain waves, gamma waves, come into play within seconds after taking this substance. So there are possibly substances that literally can be found that would link up with this concept that in the human blood there are other beings that work with us, and that's those two beings on the left and the right. You may not meet the evil Emperor, you may not meet Darth Vader, but they're there around you all at all times. Everywhere you go, you're being pulled away with media, with light, with what we call Lucifer, this being who wants to draw you out and keep you away from living in the earth and loving other people. Then you have, on the other hand, the right-hand path of Darth Vader, which wants to draw you down into control, power, dominance, militarism, violence, evil, fear, all of those things. That's him. Well, we all have those two things happening in us at all times. When we find the middle path, one could call it the higher self, or Christ, or the Buddha, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't matter. The point is you start on that path, and you become a Jedi warrior, and you know when the Force increases. You know, there's no doubt when intuition comes in. The Force, in our view of anthroposophy, is intuition. When you know something is right, and you're following your true path of destiny, like Luke kept wondering whether he was following his true path of destiny, and even in the end, there's a question left. Did he find his path of destiny? I have yet to see the new movie. I don't know. I know nothing about them. Here's what I hope happens: that Luke stays resolved as the prodigal son returned, and that there be a female Force come forward, because that is the Force of today's age. The way to combat Lucifer and Ahriman, the evil Emperor and Darth Vader, is to follow the path of Sophia, the path of wisdom, the path of the female Trinity, the path of the soul becoming purified so that it can then commune with the spirit. That is what I hope these 3 new movies will point out. They probably will, because once you start with an archetype as strong as the archetype used in the first trilogy, you can build on it infinitely. Why? Because to answer another part of your question, the character that I insisted on was that the evil emperor not be evil at first. And that he turn evil, and that we see how he turns evil. And that Darth Vader not be evil at first. We see how he turns evil. Why? Because that's teaching everyone the path that you would go if you took the left or right-hand path. We need to see that. We need to see the ultimate end of where that goes. And then we see the ultimate end of where Luke goes, which is a resolution, and he and Leia save everything, and they go off to La La Land at the end of it, and that's what a fairy tale is supposed to be. So I don't know if I'm ready to go see the new movie because I might be disappointed, but it doesn't matter. I think that when I look and I see that the power and influence of Star Wars is an industry, it's not even an industry. I now understand, my wife tells me there's churches of Jedi. There are people who worship this, that they follow it as a religion. That's wonderful that they get that, because those archetypes are real. They're in them. And when they put on the suit of Darth Vader, let them act that out. That's what we do in Waldorf schools. We put on plays, we do drama all the time. And why? Because once you've played the evil role, then you don't need to play it. You've seen what that is. Once you've played the really good role, you know where you're going. So we want people to play out these archetypal roles because they're worthy of it. And that's why those characters, the only characters I insisted on and said the entire movie is based upon, is Luke, his higher self Leia, Darth Vader, the evil emperor, and the 3 soul characters of the 3 challenges, and then the fact, which are Han's, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Han Solo, and Chewbacca, and then the 2 little robots represent in a personal way what it is to be the left and right-hand path, but not seemingly evil. The little robots are innocent. The whole story's told how they save everything, right? But that's the same machinations and mechanical darkness that made Darth Vader be happy to put machines inside of him to take over for human functions. And this is another message of Star Wars. If we follow the path of Darth Vader, we see where it goes. And it was beautiful in the end that he resolves to finding out that that's his father, because that's you accepting that part of yourself and loving him. But what did he have to give up? Because his father represented the will. I believe it was his right hand that got chopped off.
That's right.
He had to give up of his right hand so that his will, it was a reminder that Darth Vader is the path that he would go, strangely enough, on the right-hand path. Okay, I didn't make that up. That just happened. But the point is that he gave up of his right hand, which I would have said, great thing. Now, on the other hand, what happens with the Emperor? The only thing that could happen with the Emperor, can anyone defeat the Emperor? Only one person can defeat the Emperor, and technically, only one person can defeat Darth Vader. Each other.
Yep.
The evil Emperor and Darth Vader must destroy each other. Not even realizing that their goal and their what they were after, Luke, they're giving up Luke to kill each other because of their obsessiveness, because the left and right path don't really work together. They work opposite, but at the same time they work off of each other. And so in the end, it's Luke, the higher self, who then, can accept both of them for what they are, not become either one of them, understand their genesis, their development, who they are, what they had to go through, which all of us have to go through, and then resolve. So I think that those main characters were my focus, and any other characters, when I worked with them in that think tank, I wasn't focused on them. I wanted the power of the archetype to come out, and I can see in the movies that it even took a little while for George Lucas to quite come around. I believe he started that first movie, and he didn't fully get the archetype completely until it started manifesting in the second, third movie. And when he saw that it was that powerful, he saw he could build on it. And yeah, he went out and he hired other writers to write all kinds of things. Why? Because it's built upon the archetypal story, and therefore you can expand on it archetypally.
So you really gave the framework. you gave how the story would work out. You gave the main villains, the left and the right, the Emperor and Darth Vader. You gave the main character his struggle, what it is he had to fight and what it is he had to do. The fact that he had a sister, the fact that he had the father that was the evil one. And then you even gave them some of the biggest characters in the Star Wars series. Solo, Chewie, and what was the final one?
Obi-Wan.
Obi-Wan, of course. And then you even gave them the also famous and lovable side characters and what it is that they represent in the story. That sounds like quite a bit of influence.
Well, some of those characters existed, but they didn't fit in.
Oh,
and
yes.
so his descriptions just made them go off a cliff.
Like Luke Starkiller.
Luke Starkiller. They were all called Starkiller. There was a whole Starkiller family, and they're Starkillers, and that's why there was a Death Star, and then the Death Star. Well, what is the Death Star? The Death Star is taking our star and making it mechanical. Mm-hmm. It's what happens when the machines take over, you see. So once you have a certain archetype, and once you understand what that character, what their position in relationship to the others are, then it's very simple to see the way that it would go. Matter of fact, you can, people argue about Russian fairy tales because they say at the end of them, oh, no. You take the character who's been bad, and you put him in a barrel filled with nails, and you roll him down a hill. Oh, how cruel. Mm-hmm. No, that's not cruel at all. That's exactly what that character deserved. And to change it one iota would destroy the story. So I would rather not tell a fairy tale than to tell it taking out what some would be the sexism in it, the violence in it, the images they don't like. Then it won't hang together. It won't have substance. So archetypes come from the spiritual world. They are literally learning lessons, parables for each human being. The Greeks knew all about the archetypes, and movie makers know all about archetypes. I mean, they literally, that's what they're trying to put on the screen. Nowadays, they admit that. I don't know that they admitted that 38 years ago. But I appreciate the fact that Marcia Griffin was a student of Rudolf Steiner's, to some degree at least, from what I was told, and that she was very familiar with the concepts of anthroposophy, and that she allowed us to build those into those characters, and that she was so pliable and interested in what other people had to say.
Thinking about why now? This is 38 years after the initial movie. That's a long time to keep this secret. And when you look online for people that are searching for the ideas and what really brought about the Star Wars movie, there's a lot of people that say George Lucas could not have possibly come up with such a brilliant idea. And in fact, a lot of people did notice that the second trilogy, the previous one in chronological order, was rather lacking compared to the first. Why now? Why are you only bringing this information out so far in advance from when you possibly could have even capitalized on it?
Well, if you ask my children, they'll tell you that I've been telling this to them since they were born. But anybody else, I haven't shared the story much with people because I guess I thought they might not care, or they might not believe it, or in fact the real reason that it came out was because the new movie has come out. My children went to see it, and there I was saying the same thing again as I always said, I helped. And my lovely wife said, well, you're going to have to write that down, and you need to make that story available for people. And I said, I'm not really even willing then to do it. And then I saw this beautiful biography that has just popped up because the movie being released on Marcia. And I thought, well, you know what? She's an unsung hero of the real spiritual script, the true archetype, the true adult science fiction fairy tale that Star Wars has become. And though many, many, many people have added to that, and my part was just a small part, I can feel like, I've helped build the scaffolding for it, and I would have been happy to do whatever else I could for it, because I really believe that movies can change people, and that spiritual ideas can be on the big screen that can actually affect the complete collective unconscious of mankind. So it was that. The movie came out, my wife busted me, and I saw this beautiful article on Marcia Griffin.
Brilliant. Well, that sounds like quite a homage to her. Is there anything else you'd like to say to the audience? I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who'd love to hear just anything that you can really give about the Star Wars series, or maybe even something you'd like to give to them from your personal wisdom. Anything you'd like to say?
Yes, I would say and underscore what Steven Spielberg said. I once heard him say this, receiving an award. He said something to the effect that movie makers must remember that they are storytellers. And that if the story isn't good, the movie isn't good. So I recommend to everyone that you don't go to bad movies. And that when you do find a movie that has archetypal wisdom in it, that is the one that you really want to pay attention to, because these things go very, very deep into your collective unconscious and into your psyche. People have told me that Star Wars, the movies, the first three, changed their lives. And that as they came out, they literally believed that, their spiritual biography was being put up on the screen. Well, it is. It is, absolutely is. Each and every one of us is Luke Skywalker. Each and every one of us have to face the evil emperor. Each and every one of us in today's age must face this being that I insisted would be called Ahriman, but you see how much my insistence was played to. They called him Darth Vader, which actually is a much better name. But there literally is evil in the world, and that evil is coming to us through machines. And we do need to learn what George Lucas has taught us. We have to look through the eyes of these machines and see where they're going to go. And if we aren't awake, he's given us a picture that, cyborg wars, mixing humans and machines does not work. Cloning, it's an evil. There are many, many things, just like many great science fiction writers that have been put into these Star Wars movies, that we do need to glean as wisdom and realize that George Lucas has given us a beautiful example of someone who can call together an amalgamation of all the different spiritual paths and distill them down into a story that is personal. It's the story of the prodigal son. It's the only story there is of the prodigal daughter. We came from a spiritual world. We're here in a material world. We're going back to a spiritual world. What do we have to do that? So that's what I would give as advice. You can find these in any story. It has to be an archetypal story. And it's archetypal when it's out of time, when it's out of space, when it gives you challenges that you must overcome, difficult challenges, often 3, and then there's a resolution and a resolve, and then, as the end of the fairy tale always says, if things have not changed, they are still there today. And I think that the followers of Star Wars show that they're still there today.
That they are. Well,
yes.
With all this information, sounds an awful lot like you're the one being the Yoda today.
That's pretty funny. I sometimes do feel as though I'm 900 years old and that I am living on a swamp planet, alone amongst the swamp creatures and stuff, in a little teensy tiny house, because that's what happens in your brain. If you actually can do this Jedi wonder of developing metachlorians, you move into the head and you do what Rudolf Steiner says. You develop what's called the etherization of the blood. You transform material world into a spiritual world. And that's why Yoda was in that little teensy tiny house all by himself, because that's where you do live when you're developing spiritual thought. And then to learn what it is from Yoda, I think that Yoda is a perfect example of what we would call Christ, or the Christ himself, or the higher self. So there's a beautiful spiritual message there, especially before he started whipping around his lightsaber and killing people, when he was just this wise person who led the council and lived on a planet by himself, developing the Force, as it were. So no, I'm not Yoda, but I can tell you that there was an example that I gave, which I wonder if that didn't turn into Yoda, and that was that the masters always stay hidden. They live alone. They only appear when they need to affect others, and they usually only have 1 or 2 students that they train. And that's an archetype that we see in many great spiritual masters. And I wonder if that didn't affect the development of the character of Yoda.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your information today. If you'd like to find out more information on how this man influenced the creation of Star Wars, its archetypes, and its characters, you can check the URL. There is a link to an article that they wrote up on what it is that he had an influence on. Well, thank you very much, and have a great day, and may the Force be with you.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. That was a wonderful interview.